Chapter 1, There are two kinds of broke. There's the aspirational, I'm an artist, kind of broke, where you eat ramen noodles but tell everyone it's because you're cleansing your palate for a new project. Then there's the kind I was experiencing, the silent, gut-twisting, 3 a.m. panic kind of broke, where the number in your banking app looks more like a golf score than a financial safety net. My student loan deferment was about to expire, my car was making a sound like a dying badger, and my diet consisted primarily of things that came in a styrofoam cup. That's how I found myself standing in front of Barnaby's Carnival of Curiosities, on a crisp Tuesday afternoon in late September. The carnival was located on the outskirts of Hollow Creek, Ohio, a town whose best days were framed in black and white photographs behind the counter of the local diner. Barnaby's wasn't a traveling show, it was a permanent, festering landmark. It sat on a large, muddy plot of land, a collection of ramshackle wooden buildings and rusting ride skeletons that looked like the fossilized remains of some forgotten leviathan. It had been here for as long as anyone could remember, opening its creaking gates every year from the last week of September until the 1st of November, a local herald of the Halloween season. My best friend, Sarah, was already there, leaning against her beat-up Honda Civic with a grin that was far too bright for the setting. "Jake. You made it," she called out, waving. "Isn't it gloriously creepy?" "It's something," I said, kicking at a loose stone in the gravel parking lot. "I think I saw a rat carrying a smaller, weaker rat." "That's called atmosphere," she retorted, linking her arm through mine and pulling me toward a faded red building with the words "Staff Entrance" hand-painted above the door. "Think of it as method acting for our new, glamorous careers." Our glamorous careers consisted of being seasonal scare actors. The pay was surprisingly good, a flat $20 an hour, under the table, cash in hand every Friday. For a student at Ohio University trying to make rent, it was a godsend. For me, it was a lifeline I was about to grab with both hands, no matter how grimy it was. The ad Sarah had found online was simple: actors and staff wanted for a high-intensity horror attraction. No experience necessary. Must be reliable and unafraid of the dark. I was definitely afraid of the dark, but I was more afraid of my landlord's eviction notice. The inside of the staff building smelled of mildew, stale popcorn, and something vaguely metallic, like old blood. The walls were lined with grotesque masks, rubber body parts, and half-finished props. A lanky guy with greasy hair and a faded Misfits t-shirt, who introduced himself as Liam, grunted at us from behind a folding table. "You the new meat?" he asked, not looking up from his phone. "Jake and Sarah," Sarah said, her cheerfulness bouncing off Liam's apathy like a stray bullet. "We're here to see Mr. Silas." Liam jerked a thumb toward a door at the back of the room. "He's in his office. Don't touch anything." Mr. Silas's office was a stark contrast to the chaotic prop room. It was neat, almost sterile. The walls were bare except for a single, large, framed photograph of the carnival from what looked like the 1950s. The rides were new then, the paint was fresh, and the grounds were filled with smiling families. In the center of it all stood a man in a pinstripe suit and a bowler hat, presumably the original Barnaby. He wasn't smiling. Silas sat behind a large oak desk. He was a small, bird-like man, probably in his late 60s, with thin gray hair combed neatly over a spotted scalp. He wore a perfectly pressed black suit, which seemed absurdly formal for this place. His eyes, magnified by thick glasses, were a pale, watery blue. They didn't blink nearly enough, Mr. Collins. "Miss Vance." "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice a dry rustle of leaves. He gestured to two chairs. "Please." We sat. The interview, if you could call it that, was brief and bizarre. He didn't ask about our experience or our availability. He just stared at us for a long, uncomfortable moment. "You are not from Hollow Creek," he stated, looking at me. "No, sir." "Athens." We're students at OU. And you need the money, he continued, his gaze unwavering. It wasn't a question, yes, sir. He turned his unnerving stare to Sarah. And you are here for the thrill. You enjoy the sensation of fear. Both giving and receiving it. Sarah, for the first time since I'd known her, seemed a little flustered. I guess so. I love Halloween. Mr. Silas leaned back, a faint, humorless smile touching his lips. Excellent. We cater to all needs here at Barnaby's. You will both work in the main attraction, the Crimson Smile. He said the name with a strange reverence, as if it were a holy site. Liam had told us that was the crown jewel of the carnival, the massive, multi-level haunted house that sat in the very center of the park. You'll start tomorrow night. Training and costume fitting, Silas said, standing up. The interview was over. Liam will give you your schedules. You get a 30-minute break. Do not wander the grounds during your break. Stay in the staff building. Do not, under any circumstances, enter the Crimson Smile when you are not on the clock. And one last thing, he paused, his pale eyes fixing on us one last time. What you see inside the attractions is for the customers. It is not real. You must remember that. Convince yourself of it. Your sanity may depend on it. He delivered the line with the flat, emotionless tone of a man reading a weather report. We walked out of the office in a stunned silence. Okay, Sarah finally whispered as we stepped back into the prop room. He's officially the creepiest person I've ever met. You think? I muttered, rubbing the goosebumps on my arms. What was that last part? Your sanity may depend on it. Is that in the employee handbook? Liam snorted from his table, still not looking up. That's just Silas being Silas. He gets dramatic. Thinks it adds to the mystique of this dump. So, what's the deal with this place? Sarah asked, leaning against the table. Any local legends we should know about? Real hauntings? Liam finally pocketed his phone and looked at us, his expression a mixture of boredom and pity. Look, you seem like, fine, I guess. So I'll give you the real advice, not the spooky bullshit Silas feeds everyone. Show up on time. Hit your marks. Don't get drunk on your break. The only thing that's really haunted here is the plumbing in the men's bathroom. He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was a weariness to him, a jaded exhaustion that went beyond a simple crappy seasonal job. People talk, though, he added, his voice dropping slightly. They always do in a town this small. They say this land is bad. Cursed, or whatever. Old Barnaby, the guy in the photo. He didn't just die. He put a revolver in his mouth in the center of the Crimson Smile, right after his whole family died in a fire on the Tilt-A-Whirl. My stomach tightened. Seriously? Liam shrugged. So the story goes. Fire in 58. Barnaby ate a bullet a week later. They say he never left. Neither did his family. Now, you're gonna hear a lot of stories. Stuff about other workers who went crazy, or disappeared. It's all crap, okay? Campfire stories told to scare the new kids and get tourists to pay $30 to walk through a glorified barn with rubber bats hanging from the ceiling. He handed us our paperwork. Just do your job and take the cash. Don't go looking for ghosts. In my experience, they ain't worth the trouble. As we walked back to our cars under the setting sun, which painted the rust-colored rides in hues of orange and blood, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. It was just a job. A weird job, run by a creepy old man, with a tragic history. But Liam was right. It was just stories that I needed to believe that. My sanity, and my bank account, depended on it. Chapter 2, Training Night was an exercise in organized chaos. The carnival grounds, dark and silent the day before, were now buzzing with a low-level energy. Generators hummed, strings of bare, yellow bulbs cast long, dancing shadows, and about 24 other seasonal hires milled around, a mix of local townies, fellow college students, and a few hardened-looking carnies who seemed to be permanent fixtures of the place. Sarah and I were assigned to the Crimson Smile, along with Liam and a nervous-looking girl named Chloe, who couldn't have been more than 18. The costumes were a disappointment. We were given generic black robes with hoods and a selection of cheap plastic masks. Sarah chose a cracked doll face. I picked a blank, featureless white mask that felt unnervingly appropriate. Liam was our de facto guide. He walked us through the labyrinthine corridors of the haunted house, his voice a monotone drone as he pointed out our designated scare zones. "Okay, rookies. This is the main artery," he said, gesturing down a long, dark hallway. "Customers come through here. Chloe, you're in the nursery. Sarah, you're in the mirror maze. Jake, you're in the clown room. I float. Your job is simple. Hide in your designated spot, wait for a group to pass a certain point, see the little piece of red tape on the floor, then jump out and scream, or whatever. Don't touch the customers. Don't let them touch you. If anyone gets handsy, you yell, 'Code Red,' and I'll be there." The inside of the Crimson Smile was a masterpiece of low-budget horror. The walls were painted appealing, dirty black. Fake cobwebs, thick as cotton candy, clung to every surface. The air was thick with the cloying sweet smell of a fog machine. Each room had a theme, a deranged nursery filled with baby dolls with their eyes gouged out, a disorienting hall of mirrors that made you feel like you were being watched from 100 different angles, a butcher's shop with disturbingly realistic-looking meat hooks and rubber torsos, and then there was my room. The clown room.it was a large, square chamber designed to look like a demented circus tent. The walls were striped with faded red and white, and half a dozen life-sized animatronic clowns were frozen in various states of manic glee. They were old, their paint chipped, their fabric costumes stained and torn. In the center of the room, on a small, elevated stage, sat the main clown. He was bigger than the others, with a wild shock of red hair and a wide, fixed grin painted onto his porcelain face. A small plaque on the stage read, "Giggles. This is your domain, Jake," Liam said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Your spot is behind Giggles' stage. There's a little alcove. When a group comes in, the motion sensor triggers the music, a really annoying calliope tune, and Giggles' head is supposed to turn from side to side. When they're focused on him, you pop out. Easy." It did sound easy. Still, something about the room unnerved me. The clown's eyes, glassy and lifeless, seemed to follow you. And Giggles, there was something profoundly malevolent about his frozen smile. The first few nights were a blur of screaming teenagers, drunken frat boys, and families with kids who were probably too young to be there. The work was monotonous and strangely exhausting. You spent long stretches of time in absolute darkness, crouched in a cramped space, waiting. The sudden bursts of adrenaline when you jumped out were followed by an immediate return to the quiet, watchful dark.it was during those quiet moments that I started to notice things, small things, at first. The kind of things you'd immediately dismiss out of sound, like a soft footstep in the hallway. When I knew I was alone, the feeling of a cold spot in my alcove, a sudden drop in temperature that had no logical source. Once, I swore I saw one of the smaller clowns in the corner of the room, its head tilted at a slightly different angle than it had been before my break. I chalked it up to the maintenance crew, or my own tired mind playing tricks on me that I didn't mention it to Sarah. She was having the time of her life. She was a natural, her timing perfect, her screams genuinely chilling. She'd come to the staff room after our shift, buzzing with energy. "Did you hear that one group?" she'd say, laughing. I made the big guy wet himself. I swear, I saw the stain. I'd force a smile, but the place was starting to wear on me. The constant darkness, the repetitive screams, the oppressive atmosphere, it was getting under my skin. I started having nightmares. Not about monsters or murderers, but about the carnival itself. I'd dream I was walking through the Crimson Smile, but it was empty and silent, and the animatronics would turn their heads to watch me as I passed. I'd always wake up just as I reached the clown room, the sound of a faint, tinkling calliope music in my ears. It was about a week in when the first truly undeniable thing happened. That I was in my alcove, waiting for the next group. The hallway was empty. It had been a slow Tuesday night. I could hear the faint echo of Sarah's screams from the mirror maze down the hall. I was starting to doze off, my head resting against the rough, unfinished wood of the stage. That's when I heard it. A whisper. It was faint, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. It sounded like a little girl, and it came from inside the clown room. "He's watching." My head snapped up. My heart hammered against my ribs. I peered through a crack in the stage. The room was empty. The clowns were still, silent, their painted smiles mocking me in the dim safety lighting. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Silence. I told myself it was bleed over from the sound system. Or maybe Chloe, the girl from the nursery, was playing a prank. But then, I heard it again, closer this time. It was coming from right behind me, from the other side of the alcove wall. "Can you see him? The man with the red smile." I scrambled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. There was no one there. The wall behind me was solid. It was the exterior wall of the haunted house. I stayed frozen for what felt like an eternity, my breath held tight in my chest. The walkie-talkie on my belt crackled to life. It was Liam. "Group of 6 coming your way, Jake. Look alive." A moment later, I heard the telltale giggles and footsteps of the approaching customers. The motion sensor tripped. The calliope music started, a jarring, cheerful tune that sounded monstrous in my terrified state. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I had a job to do. It was all part of the show. It had to be. But as I watched Giggles' head start its slow, mechanical turn, I saw something that made my blood run cold. For just a fraction of a second, as his head passed through the beam of a single red spotlight, his painted grin seemed to stretch, to widen into something impossibly large and grotesquely real. A crimson smile that was alive. The group in the room screamed on cue. But as I jumped out from my hiding spot, my own scream was not an act. It was real. Chapter 3, I didn't tell anyone about the whisper or Giggles' impossible smile. How could I? I'd sound insane. "Hey guys, the giant clown statue is alive, and a ghost girl is whispering secrets to me." They'd send me home, and I'd be out of a job. So I bottled it up, pushing it down into that dark corner of the mind reserved for things that are too terrifying to acknowledge. But the incidents didn't stop. They got weirder, and more frequent. The small, dismissible things began to feel less like coincidences and more like a deliberate, escalating campaign. Sarah started experiencing things in the mirror maze. She told me she'd catch glimpses of a figure standing behind her in the reflections, a tall, thin man in an old-fashioned suit. When she'd spin around, there would be no one there. "It's so weird," she told me during a break, her voice hushed. "It doesn't even look like one of the other actors. He's just standing there, watching me. And the weirdest part? He doesn't have a face. It's just a blur." Chloe, who worked in the nursery, became increasingly withdrawn and jumpy. She claimed the dolls in her room were moving on their own. "I lined them all up on the shelf facing forward before my shift," she said, her eyes wide with fear, chewing on her thumbnail. But when I come back from break, some of them are turned around. Sometimes they're all facing the corner. Like they're being punished. Even Liam, the hardened cynic, seemed rattled. I overheard him arguing with Mr. Silas one afternoon in the staff room. The main breaker for the West Wing keeps tripping, Silas. Liam's voice was tense. But nothing's wrong with the wiring. I've checked it 3 times. It's just shutting off. We had a group get stuck in the pitch black for 5 minutes last night. It's a safety hazard. All machines have their ghosts, Liam, Mr. Silas had replied, his voice calm and maddeningly serene. Tend to them. The place felt like it was alive, and it was slowly, methodically, turning up the pressure. The air inside the Crimson Smile grew heavier each night. There was a palpable sense of being watched, a static charge of malevolent energy that clung to you like the damp chill of a tomb. That my own experiences in the clown room grew more intense. The whispers became a regular occurrence. The disembodied girl's voice would murmur from the walls, the ceiling, from right behind my ear. She never said anything directly threatening. It was always cryptic, unsettling phrases. They buried him under the floor. Barnaby didn't use a gun. He used a smile. The music box stops when the red man comes. And then there was Giggles. The clown had become the focal point of my dread. I started to notice that after a particularly loud or frightened group of customers went through, the air around his stage would feel colder. The red spotlight on his face seemed to burn a little brighter. I began to have the distinct, paranoid feeling that he was feeding off the fear, absorbing it like a sponge. The breaking point for me came on a Saturday night, our busiest night of the week. The park was packed, and the line for the Crimson Smile snaked all the way back to the rusted-out Ferris wheel. We were running groups through back-to-back, with barely a moment to breathe. That I was in my alcove, the calliope music a constant, maddening loop in my ears. A group of college guys, loud and obnoxious, entered the room. They were trying to act tough, punching the smaller clowns, laughing at the props. "This place is lame," one of them yelled. "Where's the real scares?" As they approached the center stage, one of them, a big guy in a football jersey, hopped onto the platform with Giggles. "Ooh, look at me, I'm a scary clown," he taunted, mimicking Giggles' pose. My blood ran cold. One of the cardinal rules was that customers were not allowed to touch the animatronics. They were old, fragile, and the wiring was a mess. Before I could yell for Liam, it happened. Giggles' head, which was supposed to be turning slowly from side to side, snapped to the right, facing the football player directly. It moved with a speed and fluidity that was utterly impossible for its ancient mechanics. Then, a sound came from the clown's internal speaker. It wasn't the calliope music. It was a low, guttural laugh. A wet, choking sound, like a man drowning in his own blood. The football player froze, his bravado instantly evaporating. The whole group fell silent. The room was filled with the sound of that horrifying laugh, and then, Giggles' arm, the one holding a small, plastic horn, shot up. It wasn't the slow, jerky movement of an animatronic. It was fast. Vicious. The plastic horn slammed into the side of the football player's head with a sickening crack that he crumpled to the floor, unconscious. The room erupted into chaos. His friends screamed, scrambling over each other to get to the exit. I burst out of my alcove, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. Liam came running in from the hallway, his face pale, code red. What the hell happened? The clown, it hit him. I stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the stage. Giggles was perfectly still again, his head facing forward, his painted smile as benign and fixed as ever. The calliope music tinkled cheerfully. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would have thought the guy had just slipped and hit his head, but I had seen it. And I saw the look in Liam's eyes. He saw the truth, too. He just didn't want to admit it. Silas was there in moments. Paramedics were called. The football player was carried out on a stretcher, still unconscious. The official story, cooked up instantly by Silas, was that the student had been drunk, had climbed on the stage against regulations, and had slipped, hitting his head on the platform. His friends, scared and confused, didn't argue. After the police and the ambulance left, Mr. Silas gathered the four of us, me, Sarah, Liam, and Chloe, in his office. Chloe was openly weeping. Sarah was white as a sheet. "The attraction will be closed for the remainder of the evening," Silas announced, his tone as placid as ever. "You will all be paid for your full shift. Go home. Rest." Rest? Sarah's voice was sharp, incredulous. "That thing, that clown attacked him, Mr. Silas. We all saw it." "You saw a tragic accident, Ms. Vance," Silas corrected her, his gaze like chips of ice. "A result of a young man's poor judgment and intoxication. The animatronic suffered a minor electrical short from the boy's interference. It is a very old machine." "That was not a short," Liam said, his voice low and dangerous. "I saw it. You know what this place is, Silas. You've always known." Mr. Silas slowly turned his head to look at Liam. The air in the room grew cold. For a moment, the mask of the mild-mannered old man slipped, and I saw something else in his eyes. Something ancient and powerful, and utterly devoid of pity. "Be very careful, Liam," he whispered, and the threat in that whisper was more terrifying than any jump scare. "You are paid to manage the attractions, not to understand them. The same goes for all of you. Now, go home." We were dismissed. No one said a word as we walked to our cars. The usual post-shift energy was replaced by a thick, suffocating dread. As I was about to get into my car, Sarah grabbed my arm. Her hand was trembling. "I'm not crazy, right, Jake?" she whispered, her eyes pleading. "You saw what I saw." "You're not crazy," I said, my voice hoarse. "It was real. What are we going to do?" I didn't have an answer. Quitting was the obvious, sane choice. To run and never look back. But the thought of my empty bank account, my impending bills. I was trapped. "I don't know," I finally said. "But we can't just let this go. Liam knows something. Silas knows everything. There's something wrong with this place, Sarah. Something evil. And we're right in the middle of it." That night, my nightmares were worse than ever. I dreamed I was back in the clown room. It was dark, but I wasn't alone. The little ghost girl was there, standing in the corner, her face obscured by shadows. She was pointing at the stage. Giggles wasn't there. The stage was empty, the girl whispered, her voice filled with a chilling, echoing sadness. "He's not in the chair anymore," she said. "He's out. And he's looking for a new smile." I woke up in a cold sweat, the sound of that wet, guttural laugh echoing in the silence of my bedroom. Chapter 4, The incident with the clown, which the staff had grimly dubbed Giggles Gate, changed everything. The thin veil of denial had been torn away, and we could no longer pretend we were working at a normal haunted house. We were working at a place that could physically harm people. A place that was actively, intelligently malevolent, yet, we all came back. Chloe, Sarah, me, even Liam. Fear is a powerful motivator, but desperation is a stronger one. We needed the money. And deep down, a darker, more morbid curiosity had taken root. We were standing on the edge of a chasm, and part of us wanted to peer into the abyss. Silas had Giggles removed from the clown room. The stage now sat empty, which was somehow even more unsettling. But his absence didn't make things better. It made them worse. It was as if by removing the focal point, the energy that had been concentrated there had been unleashed, spreading throughout the entire attraction like a virus. The activity escalated dramatically. In the nursery, Chloe reported that the rocking horse would start moving on its own, slowly at first, then building to a violent, frantic pace, slamming against the walls. The sound of a baby crying would emanate from the empty crib. In the mirror maze, Sarah saw the faceless man almost every night. He was getting closer. Sometimes, she'd see his reflection right over her shoulder, and she'd spin around to find nothing but the cold, empty air. She started refusing to go in alone, insisting that Liam or I stand at the entrance while she was at her post. My new spot was in a section designed to look like a decrepit church, complete with pews and a blood-stained altar. The whispers followed me there. The little girl's voice was a constant companion in the darkness. But now, there was another voice, too. A deep, guttural whisper that sounded like rocks grinding together. It didn't use words. It was a sound of pure hatred, a vibration that made my teeth ache. The staff was on edge. The camaraderie of the first week had dissolved into a shared, paranoid silence. We'd take our breaks in the staff room, no one speaking, just sipping coffee and staring at the walls, as if we were all waiting for something terrible to happen. Sarah and I knew we couldn't continue like this. We had to do something. We decided to confront Liam. He'd worked here for 5 seasons. He'd seen things. He knew more than he was letting on. We cornered him one evening before our shift, by the dumpsters behind the staff building. Liam, we need to talk, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. That he took a long drag from his cigarette, not meeting our eyes. There's nothing to talk about. You do your job, you get your cash, you go home. End of story. That's not the end of the story, and you know it, Sarah pressed, her voice sharp. What happened with that clown was not an accident. What's going on in this place? You know. You called Silas out on it. Liam threw his cigarette to the ground, crushing it under his boot with a savage twist. He looked up, and the jaded mask was gone. In its place was raw, visceral fear. You don't want to know, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Trust me. You're better off not knowing. Just finish the season and get the hell out of Hollow Creek. We're not leaving until you tell us, I said. We're in danger here, Liam. We all are. He stared at us for a long moment, his jaw clenched. He seemed to be wrestling with himself. Finally, he sighed, a ragged, defeated sound. Okay, he said. Fine. You want to know? I'll tell you. But not here. He glanced nervously back at the main building, as if the walls themselves were listening. Meet me at the diner on Route 33 after our shift. The old Silver Star. Don't tell anyone. Especially not Silas. The shift that night was agonizing. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every sound was a prelude to terror. Knowing that answers were just a few hours away made the waiting unbearable. The Silver Star Diner was a relic, a classic 24-hour joint with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that had been playing the same song since the 1980s. Liam was already there, hunched over a cup of black coffee in a corner booth that we slid in across from him. All right, I said, keeping my voice low. We're here. Talk. Liam took a deep breath. This is going to sound crazy. You're going to think I'm insane, or on drugs, or both. Try us, Sarah said. Okay, he began. You know the story about old man Barnaby. How he offed himself after his family died in the fire. That part's true. The whole town knows it. What they don't know is why the fire started. Or what Barnaby was into. He leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower. Barnaby wasn't just a carny. He was an occultist. A collector. He traveled the world with his carnival, and he didn't just collect strange objects, he collected strange beliefs. Rituals. He was obsessed with the idea of other dimensions, of gateways. He believed you could punch a hole through reality, if you knew the right way to do it. And this land, I prompted, this land was special to him, Liam continued. He bought it for a reason. There was something here before him. An old Native American burial ground, some people say. A place where the veil between worlds is thin. Barnaby believed this was the perfect spot to build his machine. Machine? Sarah asked. Not a machine of gears and metal. A machine of architecture and emotion. The whole carnival, it's a giant magical sigil. The layout of the rides, the design of the buildings, it's all deliberate. It's designed to focus energy. And the crimson smile is the heart of it. The focusing lens. My mind reeled. It sounded like something out of a pulp horror novel. But as crazy as it was, it fit. It explained the feeling that the whole place was interconnected, that it was more than just a collection of buildings. What was he trying to do? I asked. He was trying to open a door, Liam said, his eyes dark. And he succeeded. The problem is, he couldn't control what came through. And he couldn't close it. He took a shaky sip of his coffee. The things in there, they're not just ghosts. They're not Barnaby's family. They're something else. Something from the other side of that door. They feed on strong emotions. Joy, love, but fear is what they love most. It's like candy to them. That's why the attraction exists. It's a farm. A feeding ground. A cold dread washed over me. So Silas is his grandson, Liam confirmed. He inherited this whole mess. He's not the master of this place. He's the zookeeper. He's trapped. He has to keep the farm running. He has to keep them fed. Because he's terrified of what would happen if they got hungry and decided to leave the carnival grounds to find food elsewhere. The pieces all clicked into place. Silas's creepy calmness. His warnings. The way he managed the incidents. He wasn't a villain, he was a terrified warden of an interdimensional prison. And we were the bait, the things that have happened, Sarah whispered. The clown. The whispers. What are they? They're testing the boundaries, Liam said. They get stronger every year. More brazen. They can manipulate things now. Electronics. Physical objects. They're learning. That giggles thing, that was new. They've never been able to take over an animatronic like that before. It means they're getting powerful enough to directly possess things. He looked at us, his face grim. A few years ago, a worker, a friend of mine, he just snapped. Ranted and raved about a man with a red smile who lived in the walls. He walked out into traffic on this very road. The official report said it was suicide. But I know it wasn't. They drove him to it. They get inside your head. Find your fears and wear them like a mask. The little girl's voice. The man with the red smile. We have to get out of here, I said, my voice trembling. We have to quit. You think it's that easy? Liam let out a short, bitter laugh. You've been working there for weeks. You've breathed the air. You've been marked. They know you. They know your fears. Leaving the job doesn't mean you've left the carnival. It just means you're not on the payroll anymore. The hauntings won't stop. They'll follow you. He pointed a shaky finger at me. You think those nightmares you're having are a coincidence? They're just getting started. My blood turned to ice. How did he know about my nightmares? They whisper, Liam said, as if reading my mind. They show you things. They want you scared. They want you weak. And eventually, they want you back. Or they want you gone. A heavy silence fell over our booth. The cheerful clatter of the diner seemed a world away. We were in our own private bubble of horror, so what do we do? Sarah finally asked, her voice small and broken. We survive, Liam said, his expression hardening. We finish the season. We don't give them the fear they want. We do our jobs like robots. We watch each other's backs. And on November 1st, when Silas closes the gates, the door gets weaker. The activity dies down. And we walk away and we never, ever come back to Hollow Creek. It was a bleak plan, but it was the only one we had. There's one more thing, Liam added, leaning in one last time. The heart of it all. The place Barnaby used for his final ritual. It's a room, beneath the crimson smile. A basement that's not on any blueprint. Silas keeps it locked. He says it's for storage, but it's not. That's the source. That's the real gateway. Whatever you do, stay away from that door. As we left the diner and stepped out into the cold, pre-dawn air, I felt a profound sense of hopelessness. We weren't just working a haunted house. We were trapped inside a demonic engine, and our only job was to keep the gears greased with our own fear. And the season had only just begun. Chapter 5, Liam's confession hung over us like a funeral shroud. The world that had seemed merely strange and unsettling was now revealed to be a structured, predatory system. We weren't just employees, we were part of the ecosystem, the livestock in a farm designed to harvest terror. Armed with this horrifying knowledge, we adopted Liam's strategy: survive. We became automatons. We went to work, put on our masks, went to our scare zones, and did our jobs with a grim, joyless efficiency. We tried to wall off our fear, to give the entities nothing to feed on, but the house knew. The entities, the spirits, the things from the other side of the door, they could feel our resistance, and they didn't like it. The hauntings changed. They became more personal, more surgical. The house wasn't just trying to scare us anymore, it was trying to break us. It started targeting our deepest, most private fears. For Sarah, it was the faceless man in the mirror maze. He was no longer just a passive observer. He started to mimic her father, who had walked out on her family when she was a child. The figure would have his exact posture, his specific way of tilting his head. It wouldn't speak, but she knew it was him. It was a silent, psychological torture, a nightly reminder of her deepest wound of abandonment. She started crying silently during her shifts, the tears tracking through her doll makeup. For Chloe, whose fear was a deep-seated paranoia of being watched and judged, the dolls in the nursery began to whisper her name. Not just her work alias, but her real name. Chloe. Chloe, we see you, you're a bad girl, Chloe. She started wearing headphones under her costume's hood, blasting music to drown them out, but she told me she could still hear them, a faint, malevolent chorus beneath the melodies. For me, the house drew on my ever-present anxiety about failure and financial ruin. The little girl's voice stopped its cryptic rhymes and started whispering about my student loans, my dying car, the eviction notice I was so terrified of. You're going to lose everything, Jake, you'll be on the street, a failure, just like your father. It was a cruel, targeted assault on my most fragile insecurities, and the deep, guttural voice, the sound of grinding rocks, grew louder in the church, a constant, oppressive presence that felt like a physical weight on my chest that we held on, white-knuckled, watching each other for cracks. We'd meet in the staff room, our faces pale and drawn, and share our stories in hushed, frantic whispers. We were soldiers in a trench, describing the enemy's latest attack. He had my dad's jacket on tonight, Sarah would say, her voice hollow. They were singing a nursery rhyme my mom used to sing to me. Chloe would whimper, it knew my dad's name, I'd confess, Liam would just nod, his face a grim mask. Stay strong. Don't let them in. It's what they want. But we were all cracking. The lack of sleep, the constant psychological barrage, the suffocating atmosphere of dread, it was a war of attrition, and we were losing. The idea of the basement, the heart that Liam had warned us about, began to grow in my mind like a dark seed. It was a place of ultimate danger, but it was also the source. The answer. I found myself thinking about it constantly, an obsessive, gnawing curiosity that began to outweigh my fear. If we could just see it, understand it, maybe we could find a way to fight back. That I brought it up to Sarah one night as we were driving home, my voice barely a whisper, as if saying it too loud would make it a reality. What if we went down there? She looked at me, her eyes wide in the dashboard lights. To the basement? Are you insane? Liam said to stay away from it. I know what he said, I argued, my voice gaining a desperate edge. But what we're doing now isn't working. We're just sitting ducks, waiting to be picked off. They're getting stronger, Sarah. What happens when they do more than just whisper? What happens when they start touching us like they did that guy with the clown? I could see the conflict in her face. The terror, warring with the same desperate hope that was fueling me. What would we even be looking for? She asked. I don't know. An off switch. A power source. The damn Necronomicon. Anything. Just sitting here and taking it is the real insanity. We didn't decide that night. But the seed was planted. The idea of taking action, of fighting back, was a single point of light in an overwhelming darkness. The house, as always, seemed to know. It sensed our shift in thinking, our budding rebellion. And it decided to make an example of one of us. Its target was Chloe. It happened on a Thursday. Chloe had been getting progressively worse. She'd lost weight, her eyes were constantly darting around, and she'd taken to humming loudly to herself throughout her shift. That night, she didn't show up for her post in the nursery. Liam went to look for her. He was gone for 10 minutes. When he came back, his face was ashen. Everyone, out, he said, his voice tight with a command he'd never used before. The attraction is closed. Go to the staff room. Now. We followed him, a cold dread coiling in my stomach. When we were all gathered in the prop room, he told us what happened. He'd found Chloe. She wasn't in the nursery. She was in the mirror maze. Sarah's maze. She was standing in the very center of it, staring at her own reflection, catatonic. She had taken a shard of a broken mirror and had been methodically, silently, carving words into her own arms, the same words, over and over. I'm a bad girl. The ambulance came and took her away. She never spoke a word. Just stared blankly ahead, a faint, terrible smile on her lips. As they wheeled her past us, Mr. Silas stood by his office door, his expression unreadable. But I saw him make a small, almost imperceptible gesture. He brought his hand to his mouth and blew a soft, gentle breath towards Chloe's departing form, as if he were blowing a kiss or releasing a soul. That was it. That was the final straw. There was no more waiting. There was no more surviving. After the grounds were empty, I found Sarah and Liam huddled by the back entrance. Sarah was sobbing, her body shaking. Liam was chain-smoking, his hands trembling so badly he could barely hold his lighter. It's going to happen to all of us, isn't it? Sarah wept. It's going to pick us off, one by one, until there's no one left. Not if we stop it, I said, my voice cold and hard with a resolve I didn't know I possessed. Tonight. We're going into that basement. Liam looked at me, his eyes filled with a terrifying mix of fear and resignation. Jake, no. You don't know what you're messing with. And you do. I shot back. Has knowing helped? Has it stopped any of this? It took Chloe. It's torturing Sarah. It's coming for all of us. I'd rather go down fighting than wait to be the next one to start carving words into my own skin. My words hung in the air. Sarah stopped crying. She looked up at me, a new, fierce light in her eyes. "He's right," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I'm not going to be next. I'm not going to let them win. I'm going in with you." We both looked at Liam. He stared at the ground, then at the looming silhouette of the crimson smile, then back at us. He took one last, deep drag from his cigarette and threw it to the ground. "Damn it," he sighed, a cloud of smoke and defeat. "Damn it all to hell. If you two idiots are going, I can't let you go alone. You'll get yourselves killed in 5 minutes." He looked us both in the eye, his face a mask of grim determination. "But you listen to me. We do this my way. We go in, we look, we don't touch anything, and we get out. We are not heroes. We are just trying to see the enemy. Understand?" We both nodded. The pact was sealed. We were going to break Silas's one cardinal rule. We were going to open the door to the heart of the carnival. We were going to step into the abyss, and the abyss, I knew, was waiting for us. Chapter 6. The air inside the Crimson Smile after closing was different. It was a heavier silence, a watchful stillness that felt more menacing than the cacophony of screams and sound effects during operating hours. The three of us moved through the darkened corridors like ghosts ourselves, our flashlight beams cutting nervous, trembling paths through the gloom. Liam led the way. He knew the building's layout better than anyone. He guided us through the back routes, the staff-only corridors that ran like arteries behind the themed rooms. "The door is in the boiler room," he whispered, his voice echoing unnaturally in the confined space. "It's at the very back of the building, on the ground floor." The boiler room was a cramped, hellishly hot space filled with a tangle of pipes and a massive, ancient furnace that squatted in the center like a sleeping iron beast. The air was thick with the smell of rust and ozone, and there, on the far wall, was the door that it was nothing like I had imagined. It wasn't an ornate, evil-looking gate. It was a simple, unassuming steel door, painted a faded industrial gray. It had no handle, no hinges visible from our side, and a single, heavy-duty padlock securing a thick hasp. It looked like it led to a utility closet. But the air around it was freezing cold, a pocket of Arctic chill in the sweltering boiler room. My breath plumed in front of my face. "That's it," Liam breathed, his flashlight beam fixed on the padlock. "The door to the sub-level. How do we get it open?" Sarah asked. Liam pulled a massive bolt cutter from the tool bag he'd brought. "Silas thinks he's clever. He uses a new lock every few weeks. But he buys them from the same hardware store in town. They only have so many models." With a grunt of effort, he positioned the bolt cutter. The metal groaned in protest, and then with a loud, shocking snap, the lock broke and fell to the concrete floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent building. We all froze, listening, waiting for Silas or some otherworldly alarm to descend upon us. Nothing happened. Liam pushed the hasp aside. He put his hands on the cold steel of the door and pushed. It didn't budge. "It's heavy," he grunted. "Help me." Sarah and I put our shoulders against the door and pushed with all our might. For a moment, it resisted, and then with a deep, grinding groan of metal on stone, it swung inward, revealing a flight of steep, narrow concrete stairs descending into absolute blackness. A wave of foul air washed over us. It was a smell unlike anything I had ever encountered. It was cold, and ancient, and it smelled of damp earth, rotted meat, and something else, a strange, electric scent, like the air after a lightning strike, but charged with a cloying, sickly sweetness. It was the smell of wrongness. "Okay," Liam said, his voice trembling slightly. "Flashlights on. Stay close." And remember what I said. We look. We don't touch. We started down the stairs, one tentative step at a time. The flashlight beams seemed to be swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The concrete steps were slick with a thin, greasy film. The air grew colder with each step, the foul smell more intense. The staircase ended in a small, square room. It was completely bare, the walls, floor, and ceiling all made of the same rough, unfinished concrete. There were no other doors, no windows, nothing. It was a dead end. A concrete box. What is this? Sarah whispered, her voice tight with confusion and fear. There's nothing here. There has to be, I said, sweeping my flashlight beam across the floor, and then I saw it. In the very center of the floor, almost invisible against the gray concrete, was a shape. A circle, about 10 feet in diameter, etched into the stone. The line was faint, filled with dirt and grime, but it was unmistakably a deliberate marking. Liam knelt down, wiping away the dirt with his glove. As he cleared a section, we saw that the circle was not just a line. It was filled with intricate, interlocking symbols and writing. The script was alien, a complex mesh of sharp angles and flowing curves that seemed to writhe and shift in the wavering light of our flashlights. It was the same script I had seen in Barnaby's occult books. This is it, Liam breathed, a note of awe and terror in his voice. The heart. The gateway. As he spoke the word gateway, something happened. The symbols on the floor began to glow. It started as a faint, barely perceptible red light, like dying embers. But it grew in intensity, pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm, like a monstrous heart beating in the depths of the earth. The red light filled the small room, painting our terrified faces in bloody hues. The air began to hum, a low-frequency vibration that resonated deep in my bones, and the smell, the sickly sweet, electric smell intensified, becoming so thick it was hard to breathe. We need to go, Sarah said, her voice frantic, grabbing my arm. Liam, Jake, we need to go now. But Liam and I were mesmerized, frozen in place by the terrifying spectacle. The pulsing red light was hypnotic, beautiful and horrifying in equal measure. It felt ancient and powerful and profoundly intelligent. We weren't just looking at a glowing symbol on the floor. We were in the presence of something. We were being looked at. That's when the whispers started. But these weren't the whispers from upstairs. They weren't the voice of the little girl or the guttural growl. These were 1,000 voices, 1,000,000 voices, all speaking at once from every direction, a tidal wave of sound that was both inside and outside our heads. They were speaking in a language we couldn't understand, but the emotional intent was crystal clear: hunger, and hatred, and a desperate, clawing need. The red light on the floor flared, becoming blindingly bright. In the center of the circle, the air began to shimmer and distort, like heat haze on a summer road. The fabric of reality itself seemed to be thinning, stretching, preparing to tear its opening. Liam yelled, finally snapping out of his trance. It's opening. Run. We scrambled back up the stairs, tripping over each other in our panic. The cacophony of voices grew louder, angrier. The humming vibration intensified, shaking the very foundation of the building. I could feel a pressure building in my ears, in my skull, as if something was trying to force its way in. We burst out of the basement, slamming the heavy steel door shut behind us. Liam fumbled with the broken padlock, trying to jam it back into the hasp, a futile, desperate gesture. It's not going to hold, he screamed over the din. We didn't wait to see if he was right. We ran. We fled through the boiler room, through the dark corridors of the Crimson Smile, and burst out into the cool, clean night air of the carnival grounds. We didn't stop running until we reached the parking lot. We collapsed against my car, gasping for breath, our bodies trembling, our minds reeling from the horror we had just witnessed. The humming had stopped. The building was silent again. What was that? Sarah gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Oh my God, what was that?" "That was the door," Liam said, his face pale and slick with sweat. "And we just knocked on it. We knew then that we had made a terrible mistake. We hadn't found a way to fight back. We had just announced our presence to whatever was on the other side. We had woken it up. We had rung the dinner bell, and as we stood there, shivering in the empty parking lot, a single light flickered on in the highest window of the Crimson Smile. A single, small, blood-red light that it pulsed once, twice, and then went out. That it was a sign. A promise, the hunt was on. And we were the prey. Chapter 7, the drive back to Athens from Hollow Creek was a silent, 20-mile scream. The three of us sat crammed in the front of my sputtering Toyota, the cab thick with a shared, suffocating terror. We had done more than knock on the door, we had kicked it. And something on the other side had noticed. The single, pulsing red light we'd seen in the window of the Crimson Smile wasn't a warning, it was an acknowledgement. A predator locking its eyes on its prey. Liam's grim survival plan was now a laughable relic of a simpler, more ignorant time. The strategy of keeping our heads down was obsolete. We hadn't just been marked anymore, we had been formally invited to the slaughter. Sleep, for any of us, was impossible. I dropped Liam off at his rundown apartment complex, and he got out of the car without a word, his face a hollow mask in the glow of the streetlights. Sarah was supposed to stay at my place. Neither of us could bear the thought of being alone, but the moment we walked into my small, second-floor apartment, we knew we hadn't escaped anything. The air was cold. Not just cool, but a deep, penetrating cold, just like the basement. The kind that felt like it was leaching the warmth from your very bones. And the smell was there. Faint, but unmistakable. Damp earth, decay, and that sickly sweet electric tang. "It's here," Sarah whispered, her hand gripping my arms so tightly her knuckles were white. "Oh God, Jake, it followed us." Every shadow in my apartment, a place that was supposed to be my sanctuary, now seemed to twist with malevolent potential. I walked through the small living room, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Nothing was out of place. The stack of textbooks on the coffee table, the dirty dishes in the sink, the poster for the thing on the wall, everything was exactly as I had left it. But the feeling of being watched, the oppressive weight of a hostile presence, was so thick it was almost a physical force. That I went into the bathroom and flicked on the light. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were wide, my face pale. I looked haunted, and for a split second, the reflection blinked when I hadn't. That I recoiled, stumbling back against the door. I stared at the mirror, my breath hitched in my throat. My reflection stared back, perfectly normal, perfectly still. I told myself I had imagined it. I was exhausted, terrified, my mind playing tricks on me, but as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something else in the mirror, in the reflection of the darkened hallway behind me. A tall, thin figure, standing just at the edge of the light. A figure wearing a familiar pinstripe suit and a bowler hat. His face was a pale, blurry smear, but I didn't need to see his features to know who it was. It was Barnaby. That I spun around. The hallway was empty. "Sarah?" I called out, my voice cracking. "In here," she answered from the living room. Her voice was small, trembling. That I found her standing in the middle of the room, staring at my television. The screen was off, a blank, black mirror. "What is it?" I asked. "Listen," she whispered. That I fell silent. And then I heard it. Coming from the dead speakers of the television. The faint, tinkling notes of a calliope. The same maddeningly cheerful tune from the clown room. It grew louder, the sound distorted and warped, as if it were being played on a record that was melting. That we backed away, huddling together in the doorway. The music filled the small apartment, a deranged, triumphant anthem. And on the black screen of the television, a shape began to resolve. Not a picture, but a single, thin line of crimson light, slowly etching itself into the darkness. It curved upwards at the edges, forming a wide, predatory grin. The crimson smile.it glowed there, in the heart of my apartment, for a full minute, a brand of ownership. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the music stopped and the image vanished. The apartment was silent again, but the violation was complete. There was no sanctuary. There was no escape. They weren't just at the carnival anymore. They were with us. Chapter 8. The next few days were a descent into a personalized hell. The entity, or entities, had untethered themselves from the carnival grounds and latched onto us like spiritual parasites. The hauntings were no longer confined to work. They were a constant, 24/7 assault designed to dismantle our sanity piece by piece. My apartment became a landscape of subtle terror. I'd come home to find all the cabinet doors in my kitchen wide open. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find my bedroom door, which I had locked, standing ajar. The whispers of the little girl became a constant companion, murmuring from the vents, the plumbing, the static between radio stations. She never stopped talking about my failures, my fears, my father. The reflections were the worst. I started avoiding them. I covered the bathroom mirror with a towel. I unplugged the television. But I'd catch glimpses of them anyway. The reflection of the man in the bowler hat in a store window as I walked past. The brief, horrifying image of my own smile stretching too wide in the reflection of my phone screen before it lit up. Sarah was enduring her own private torture. The mimic of her father began appearing in her apartment. She told me she saw him sitting in her favorite armchair, or standing in her kitchen, just watching her. One night, she woke up to find a single, half-empty bottle of his favorite brand of bourbon sitting on her nightstand, a brand she hadn't bought, a brand she hadn't seen in 15 years. The psychological cruelty was exquisite. Liam, who lived alone and had no family to speak of, was haunted by his past failures. He told us the entities were replaying his friend's suicide over and over in his mind. He'd hear the screech of the tires, the sound of the impact. He started drinking heavily, his hands in a perpetual tremor. We were falling apart. We stopped going to classes. We barely ate. We only left our apartments to go to work, because, paradoxically, being at the source of the horror felt marginally safer than being alone with it. At the carnival, at least, we were together. We knew we had to do something. Our desperate, half-baked plan to see the enemy had backfired spectacularly. Now we needed a new plan. A real one. Barnaby's journal, I said one evening. The three of us were huddled in the relative safety of the brightly lit staff room an hour before our shift. Liam, you said he was an occultist. He must have kept records. A diary, a grimoire, something. If we can find it, maybe we can find out how to reverse what he did. How to close that damn door for good. It would be in Silas's office, Liam said, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. That's his inner sanctum. He keeps all of Barnaby's old stuff locked up in there. Then we have to get into his office, Sarah said, her voice determined. The terror had burned away her fear, leaving behind a hard, brittle core of anger. We have to get that journal. The plan was simple, and incredibly stupid. We would wait for a busy Saturday night, when Silas was most preoccupied with managing the park. During our 30-minute break, while one of us created a distraction, the other two would break into his office. Liam, who knew the most about the park's operations, volunteered for the distraction. He would fake a major electrical failure on the old scrambler ride at the far end of the park, something that would require Silas's direct attention and keep him occupied for at least 20 minutes. Sarah and I were on lockpicking duty. Or rather, Sarah was. It was a skill she'd picked up during a brief, misguided teenage rebellion phase that she never talked about but occasionally proved useful. The following Saturday arrived, thick with the nervous energy of our impending crime. The park was swarming. The air was electric with the screams and laughter of the crowd, a perfect cover for our desperate mission. 9:30 p.m., on the dot, Liam's voice crackled over the radio. "Silas, we have a problem at the Scrambler. The main motor just seized up. There's smoke. I think you need to see this." "On my way," Silas's dry voice replied. That was our cue. Sarah and I slipped out the back of the Crimson Smile and made our way to the staff building. The door to Silas's office was locked, as expected. "Okay, stand watch," Sarah whispered, pulling a small set of tension wrenches and picks from her pocket. She knelt before the lock, her expression a mask of intense concentration. That I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding, my eyes scanning the chaotic prop room, expecting Silas or some shadowy apparition to appear at any moment. Every creak of the old building sounded like a footstep. "It's an old lock," Sarah muttered, her fingers working deftly. "Simple tumbler. He's arrogant. Never thought any of his disposable carny folk would have the nerve to." She paused. A soft click echoed in the room. "Got it." She pushed the door open, and we slipped inside, closing it gently behind us. The office was exactly as I remembered it, neat, sterile, and cold. We didn't have much time. "You check the desk. I'll check the filing cabinets," I whispered. That we worked in a frantic, silent haste. The filing cabinets contained nothing but boring financial records, employee files, and maintenance logs. The desk drawers held stationery, pens, and other mundane office supplies. "Nothing, Jake," Sarah said, her voice laced with panic. "It's not here." My eyes scanned the room, looking for anything out of place. And then I saw it. The large, framed photograph of the 1950s carnival. It was hanging slightly crooked. That I walked over to it and straightened it. As I did, my fingers brushed against the back. It wasn't a solid back. It was a hidden compartment. "A safe, Sarah, over here." It was a small, wall-mounted safe with a combination dial. There was no way we could get it open in time. "We're screwed," Sarah breathed. That I stared at the dial, my mind racing. A combination. Numbers. What numbers would be important to Silas? Dates? His birthday? Barnaby's? And then, my eyes fell on the photograph itself. Barnaby, standing with his dead family. The date of the fire. Liam had told us. 1958. What was the exact date? I didn't know. I looked closer at the photo, at the happy families in the background. It was summer. Kids were in shorts. Maybe a holiday. 4th of July, I tried it. Right to 7. Left past 7 to 4. Right to 58. That I pulled the handle. It didn't budge, damn it. I tried other combinations, other significant dates I could think of. Halloween. The date the park opened each year. Nothing. That my radio crackled. It was Liam. He's on his way back. Get out of there now. We had seconds. My eyes darted around the room in a final, desperate scan. My gaze landed on the desk. On a small, silver frame I hadn't noticed before. It was a picture of a woman, old and smiling. And next to her, a small, engraved plaque, Eleonora Silas. 1921, 1987. His wife. His mother. It didn't matter. 1987, the year she died. A significant date. A year of loss. With trembling fingers, I spun the dial. Right to 19. Left past 19 to 87. I didn't have a third number. I just tried pulling the handle. With a heavy, well-oiled thunk, the safe door swung open. Inside, there was only one object. A thick, leather-bound book, its cover black and unmarked, its pages edged in a faded, tarnished gold. Barnaby's journal. I grabbed it. Sarah and I slipped out of the office, closing the door behind us, just as we heard Silas's footsteps approaching the main building. We scrambled back to our posts in the Crimson Smile, our hearts exploding in our chests. I hid the journal under my robe, the ancient leather cold against my skin. We had it. We had the key, but as I stood in the darkness of the decrepit church, I felt a new kind of dread. Finding the journal wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the real horror. Because now, we would learn exactly what we were up against. And I had a sickening feeling that ignorance, as terrifying as it had been, was a blessing we were about to lose forever. Chapter 9. We waited until we were back in the relative safety of my locked apartment to open the journal. We sat at my small kitchen table, the book lying between us like an unexploded bomb. The leather cover was worn smooth with age, and it felt strangely warm to the touch. With a deep breath, I opened it. The pages were filled with Barnaby's handwriting. It was a tight, spidery script, the ink faded from black to a rusty brown. The book was a chaotic mix of a personal diary, scientific notes, and arcane ramblings filled with the same writhing symbols we had seen on the basement floor. The first half of the journal detailed his travels, his growing obsession with the occult, and his search for a conduit, a place where the walls of reality were thin. He found it in Hollow Creek, Ohio. He wrote about the land with a feverish excitement, calling it the resonant earth and the wound in the world. Then, the entries took a darker turn. He began to describe his attempts to build his engine, the carnival itself. It was exactly as Liam had said. Every ride, every building, was a carefully placed component in a massive, esoteric machine designed to harness the energy of the land and focus it into the sublevel of the Crimson Smile. His goal was not just to open a door. It was to achieve apotheosis. He believed that by punching a hole into what he called the silent, static dimension, he could draw its power into himself, becoming a god. Then I found the entry that made my blood run cold. It was dated a week before the fire of 58, success. The gateway is stable. I have made contact. It is not a place, but a consciousness. Singular. Ancient. It has no name, so I shall give it one. I call it the Auditor, for it perceives all. It learns through observation. It has shown me wonders, galaxies being born and dying, the architecture of time itself. It speaks into my mind, not with words, but with pure concepts. It is beautiful. But the next entry, written just a day later, was filled with a new, creeping dread. The Auditor is hungry. It desires sensation, experience. It has existed for eons in a void of pure thought, and our world, our messy, emotional, chaotic world, is a banquet to it. It feeds on emotion. Love, joy, sorrow, they are all sustenance. But it has a preference. It craves the most potent, most concentrated emotional energy. It craves fear. Stark, primal terror. It described the sensation to me as a crimson effervescence. A beautiful, terrible phrase. The journal then detailed the final ritual. To fully open the door and draw the power into himself, Barnaby needed a massive surge of energy. A grand sacrifice. He had planned to use the energy of the crowd on the busiest night of the season, but something went wrong. The Auditor was more powerful, more seductive than he had anticipated. It began to influence him, to twist his desires. The last few entries were a descent into madness. His handwriting grew erratic, sprawling across the page. It shows me a new path. Not to become a god, but to merge with it. To become its anchor in this reality. We will be one. It asks only for a sign of my devotion. A grand gesture. It wants the screams. It wants the fear. My family, they will be the first to contribute. Their terror will be the key that unlocks the final door. They will be part of something eternal. He had caused the fire. He had murdered his own family on the tilt-a-whirl, sacrificing their terror to his new god. The final entry was short, written in a shaky, barely legible scrawl. The offering was not enough. The gateway is open, but I cannot cross. It is trapped on its side, and I am trapped on mine. It is angry. It is hungry. It wears my face now in the shadows. It wears my smile. I am going to join it. I will be its eternal caretaker. Its smile in the dark. He had killed himself in the heart of his machine, his final act not one of suicide, but of ultimate, eternal union. He had become the first true ghost of the carnival, the primary vessel for the entity he had summoned. The man with the red smile, Sarah, was weeping silently, her hand over her mouth. So the ghosts, the little girl, my dad, they're not real. They're puppets, I said, the horrifying truth settling in my soul. The auditor, this entity, it's a mimic. It's a parasite of consciousness. It looks into our minds, finds our deepest pains and fears, and it wears them. It creates these apparitions to generate the specific flavor of fear it wants from each of us. We had been wrong. We weren't being haunted by a legion of spirits. We were being haunted by one, single, ancient, and infinitely cruel intelligence that we frantically scanned the rest of the journal, looking for a solution, a way to close the door. We found it in the last few pages, in a section titled, Contingencies and Unraveling. Barnaby, in a moment of lucidity before his final descent, had outlined a way to reverse the process. The unraveling ritual. It was complex, dangerous, and had to be performed on a night when the veil between worlds was at its thinnest and the entity was at its most powerful, gorged on energy. Halloween night, the ritual required two things. First, the machine had to be turned against itself. Specific artifacts from the carnival, a gear from the first Ferris wheel, the original ticket from the first customer, a shard of porcelain from Barnaby's favorite clown, had to be placed at key points within the crimson smile to disrupt the flow of energy. Second, the gateway in the basement had to be sealed. But it couldn't be sealed from our side. The ritual required someone to physically sever the connection. The journal was chillingly specific, the anchor must be pulled. A living soul, shielded by a circle of iron and salt, must cross the threshold into the static dimension at the moment of the ritual's peak. They must find the heart of the auditor's anchor, a psychic tether, and destroy it. This act will sever the connection, causing the gateway to collapse upon itself. The volunteer, however, will be permanently sealed on the other side. A soul for a world. A suicide mission. A human sacrifice. That we stared at the page, the words blurring through my terrified eyes. This was the answer. A way to end it. But the cost was unthinkable. No, Sarah whispered. There's no way. We can't. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Liam. Silas knows. He found the safe open. He's coming to your apartment. Get out now. That my blood froze. We heard the sound of a car pulling up on the street below, followed by a car door slamming. He's here, I breathed. That we were trapped. We had the knowledge, we had the solution, but we were cornered by the one man who would do anything to stop us from using it. We grabbed the journal and ran for the back fire escape, just as a heavy, insistent knocking began on my apartment door. We clambered down the rickety metal stairs and ran into the night, the leather-bound book clutched in my hands like a cursed relic. We were fugitives now, hunted by a demon and its zookeeper. And Halloween was only 2 days away. Chapter 10. We spent the next 48 hours living like ghosts ourselves. We stayed at a cheap, no-name motel 20 miles out of town, paying in cash. We kept the lights on at all times and took turns sleeping. Every creak of the building, every passing car, sent a fresh jolt of paranoia through us. We were hunted, and the whole world felt like a trap. Liam met us there. He had fled his own apartment, certain that Silas would be looking for him, too. The three of us sat in the stale, cigarette-scented motel room, the journal open on the threadbare comforter. There was no more debate. There was no other option. The unraveling ritual was our only path. The thought of the sacrifice, of one of us being lost forever, hung in the air, a subject too terrible to broach directly. First things first, Liam said, his voice practical and grim, a general planning a hopeless battle. We need the artifacts. A gear, a ticket, and a piece of the clown. Giggles, I said. Silas had him removed. He's probably in storage. Or destroyed. He wouldn't destroy it, Liam insisted. Silas never throws anything original away. It's all part of the machine. It's probably in the main storage warehouse, behind the midway. Our mission was clear. On Halloween night, under the cover of the massive crowds, we would have to break into the warehouse to get the clown shard, then break into the Crimson Smile, a place now actively trying to kill us, to plant the artifacts, and finally, descend into the basement to perform the ritual. And we had to do all of it before Silas and his own security team could find and stop us. One of us will have to do the distracting, Sarah said, looking at Liam. No, Liam said, shaking his head. A simple distraction won't work this time. Silas will be expecting it. He'll have the whole place locked down. We go in together, and we fight our way through. The day of Halloween was a long, gray, agonizing crawl. As dusk fell, we drove towards Hollow Creek. The roads were packed with cars heading to the carnival. From a distance, it looked almost cheerful, a riot of colored lights and sound. But we knew it was a facade, a brightly lit abattoir that we parked a mile away and walked the rest, slipping through a break in the chain-link fence at the back of the property. The air was electric, not just with the energy of the crowd, but with the power of the entity. It was awake, it was gorged, and it was waiting. Getting into the storage warehouse was surprisingly easy. Liam jimmied a lock on a side door, and we slipped into the cavernous, dark space. It was a graveyard of carnival history. Old ride cars, peeling signs, and 100 forgotten props sat under thick blankets of dust. In the back corner, under a heavy canvas tarp, we found him. Giggles. He was sitting on the floor, his head lolling to one side, his painted smile seeming to mock us even in the gloom. I took a tire iron from Liam's bag. My hands were shaking as I approached the clown. It felt wrong, like desecrating a corpse. I brought the iron down on its porcelain face. It shattered with a sharp crack, sending shards of white and red across the floor. I grabbed the largest piece, a curved sliver that contained the corner of his Crimson Smile. We had the artifacts. Now for the hard part, getting into the Crimson Smile was a nightmare. The main entrance was a river of people. We used a staff service door, Liam once again breaking the lock. The moment we stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. The air was freezing, and the hatred was a physical presence. The building knew we were there, and it was furious. The whispers started immediately, a deafening chorus from a million angry voices. The lights flickered violently. Doors slammed open and shut down the corridors. We moved quickly, our flashlights cutting through the strobing darkness. We planted the first artifact, the old gear, in the motor of the decrepit church's organ. We tucked the ancient ticket into the frame of a mirror in Sarah's maze. As we did, the mirrors around us all flashed with the image of the faceless man, 100 copies of him turning their heads in unison to watch us. Our final stop was the clown room. The stage was still empty, a dark, accusing void. The place where we had to leave the clown shard. As I stepped onto the stage, the room was plunged into absolute darkness. Our flashlights died. The emergency lights went out. We were blind, and in the suffocating black, a voice spoke. It was not the whispers. It was a clear, calm, resonant voice. The voice of Barnaby himself, coming from all around us. "You cannot stop the show," it said. "The audience is waiting." A single, blood-red spotlight snapped on, illuminating the center of the stage where I stood. And I was no longer alone. A figure stood before me. The man with the red smile. He looked exactly as he had in the old photographs, pinstripe suit, bowler hat, but his face was a shifting, translucent mask of shadow and light. And his smile was a wound in reality, a slash of brilliant, impossible crimson. "You have brought me a gift," the Barnaby thing said, its gaze falling on the shard of porcelain in my hand. "A piece of myself. Thank you." It glided towards me, its feet not touching the floor. Sarah screamed. Liam yelled my name. But I was frozen, paralyzed by a terror so profound it transcended sound. As it reached for me, a figure burst into the room from the hallway. It was Mr. Silas. He held a strange object in his hand, a heavy iron rod wrapped in copper wire. "Get away from him, Father," he screamed, his voice raw with a lifetime of anguish and fear. The Barnaby thing turned its head slowly, its crimson smile widening. "My boy," it purred. "You have come to join the performance." "The show is over," Silas snarled. He lunged forward, thrusting the iron rod into the apparition's chest. There was a sound like 1,000 sheets of glass shattering. The entity shrieked, a sound that ripped at our sanity, a sound of pure static and rage. The red light of its smile flared, and the figure of Barnaby dissolved into a cloud of screeching darkness that shot up into the ceiling. Silas collapsed to the floor, breathing heavily. "Go," he yelled at us. "Now. While it's disoriented. Seal the door. It's the only way." We didn't need to be told twice. We left him there and ran for the boiler room, for the basement, for the gateway. Chapter 11. The basement was a maelstrom of raw power. The red light from the sigil on the floor was no longer pulsing, it was a solid, blinding glare. The air hummed so intensely it felt like our teeth would shatter. The cacophony of voices was a physical assault. Liam worked quickly, drawing a large circle around the glowing sigil with a thick line of rock salt from his bag. He then placed 4 heavy iron stakes at the cardinal points, just outside the circle. It was the shield the journal had described. "Once we start, it's going to know," he yelled over the din, "it's going to throw everything it has at us." We stood inside the circle of salt, the 3 of us, the red light bathing us in a hellish glow. Now came the final, terrible step. "The sacrifice." "I'll do it," Liam said, his voice quiet but firm, cutting through the chaos. "No." Sarah cried, grabbing his arm. "Liam, we'll find another way." "There is no other way," he said, his eyes meeting hers. He looked at her with a profound, heartbreaking sadness. "It drove my friend to his death. It's taken a piece of all of us. I'm not going to let it take anyone else. This ends tonight." He looked at me. "When I cross over, you have to finish the incantation. Don't hesitate, Jake. No matter what you see or hear. You finish it. You seal the door behind me. Promise me." Tears were streaming down my face, but I nodded. "I promise." He gave us a final, grim smile. "See you on the other side. Or not." He took a deep breath, and before we could say another word, he stepped out of the salt circle and walked directly into the center of the glowing red gateway. The moment he crossed the threshold, the entity struck. The air in the center of the circle shimmered, and Liam was no longer Liam. One moment he was himself, the next he was a shifting kaleidoscope of our deepest fears. He became Sarah's father, his face contorted in a sneer of disappointment. He became Chloe, her arms bleeding, whispering, "Bad girl." He became the man with the red smile, his grin splitting his face, "Liam." Sarah screamed, starting to move towards him. I grabbed her, holding her back. "Don't. It's an illusion. He's still in there. We have to finish it." I opened the journal to the last page, my hands shaking so badly I could barely read the words. It was a short, guttural incantation in the entity's own language. I began to chant, the alien words feeling like poison on my tongue. As I spoke, the illusion of Liam flickered and died. He was himself again, standing in a vortex of red light, his face a mask of agony. He was on the other side. He looked at us, his eyes wide. "I see it," he yelled, his voice sounding distant, echoing. "The heart. It's beautiful." He reached out his hand into the shimmering air, as if grabbing something we couldn't see. He clenched his fist, and he screamed, a long, terrible scream of both pain and triumph. The red light of the gateway flared, and then it began to collapse in on itself, folding inward like a dying star. The humming rose to an unbearable shriek. The voices screamed in rage and pain. The last thing we saw of Liam was his face, illuminated by the imploding light, and he was smiling. Then, with a final, deafening boom that shook the entire carnival to its foundations, the gateway vanished. The light, the sound, the pressure, it was all gone. The basement was plunged into a sudden, absolute, and blessedly normal darkness and silence. We stood there in the dark, gasping, sobbing, our flashlights flickering back to life one by one. The circle on the floor was just a faint etching in the concrete again. It was over. Liam was gone. But it was over. We stumbled out of the basement, out of the crimson smile, and into chaos. The power surge from the collapsing gateway had blown every circuit in the park. People were screaming, running in a panic through the darkened grounds. We saw smoke rising from the direction of the Ferris wheel. In the confusion, no one noticed us. We walked away from Barnaby's Carnival of Curiosities for the last time, leaving the smoldering ruins of our own private hell behind us. Epilogue. It's been 6 years. The official story was that a massive electrical fire, started by faulty wiring, had destroyed half of Barnaby's Carnival of Curiosities on Halloween night. The park was condemned and never rebuilt. It sits there still, a true ghost, rotting away on the edge of Hollow Creek. Mr. Silas was never seen again. They found his car in the parking lot, but he had vanished. Sarah and I finished college. We tried to stay close, but the trauma was a chasm between us that we could never quite cross. We had survived something together that no one else could ever understand, and in a way, that made us strangers to each other, and to the rest of the world. She moved to Oregon a few years ago. We email sometimes, on holidays. We never talk about what happened. We don't have to. I live in Chicago now. I have a boring, stable accounting job. I have a small, quiet apartment. I have a life that is as meticulously normal as I can possibly make it. I avoid horror movies. I don't celebrate Halloween. I tell myself we won. We closed the door. We saved a lot of people from a horror they would never know existed. Liam's sacrifice meant something. I have to believe that, but sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone and the city is quiet, I'll remember the feeling of that basement. The hum of the gateway. The hunger of the auditor, and on very rare, very bad nights, when I'm tired and my guard is down, I'll catch a glimpse of myself in a dark window or a bathroom mirror. And I'll see it. Just for a fraction of a second, that my own smile, stretching just a little too wide. My own grin, for a fleeting, horrifying moment, tinged with a faint, familiar, and impossible crimson. The door is closed. But the auditor, the thing from the silent, static dimension, learned about our world through us. And I know, with a certainty that lives in the deepest, coldest part of my soul, that when it looked at us, it didn't just learn our fears that it learned our faces.